Today, we'll do a story from the Mahabharata about Dronacharya and Drupad. It's a story about how refusing to acknowledge a decades long friendship can lead to a decades long grudge and humiliation. Welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast that will take you on a journey through the rich mythology, folklore, and history of the Indian subcontinent. I am Narad Muni, the celestial storyteller and the original Time Lord. With my ability to travel through space and time, I can bring you exciting and fascinating stories from the past, the present, and the future. From the epic tales of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana to the folk tales of the Panchatantra, to stories of Akbar Birbal and Tenali Raman, I have a story for every occasion. The purpose of the stories is neither to pass judgment nor to indoctrinate. My goal is only to share these stories with people who may not have heard them before, and to make them more entertaining for those who have. Today, we are doing a story from the Mahabharata. This story is from the main storyline and not one of the peripheral ones that we have done before. All of the stories are available in links on the show notes, but I'll give you a short summary of the story so far. The Mahabharata is one of the two greatest epics from India, the other being the Ramayana, which we have also covered on the show. The Mahabharata started with Bhishma, the crown prince of Hastinapur. Bhishma made a promise that he would never marry, nor have any children. He did this just because his father, the king, had decided to marry the woman of his choice. Said woman of his choice decided she would choose the next king. So Bhishma promised that only her unborn children would sit on the throne, and that he would be on the sidelines, always there to protect and serve them. That was just one of many succession problems that Hastinapur experienced. First, there weren't enough candidates to sit on the throne. Then, there were too many. Dhritarashtra became the king, despite being blind, because he was in that phase of Hastinapur's history when not enough kings were available. But Dhritarashtra worked to rectify the problem, because him and his wife Gandhari had 102 children. The only problem was, maybe it wasn't their oldest son, Duryodhan, who would sit on the throne. Popular opinion seemed to favor Yudhishthir. Yudhishthir was the oldest son of Pandu, who was Dhritarashtra's brother and a former king. Yudhishthir was older than Duryodhan, but Duryodhan was the eldest son of the current emperor. And because people left this succession ambiguity unresolved, a lot of lives were lost. I've said this before and I'll say it again. There are no heroes and villains in the Mahabharata. There are just people who sometimes do nice things and sometimes do evil things. The Pandavas and the Kauravas grew up under the tutelage of first Kripacharya and later Dronacharya. And each child found something to be passionate about. Arjun, the Pandav, was an expert archer. Bhim, who was also a Pandav, and Duryodhan were amongst the strongest within their siblings. We'll continue the story at the point where the princes have all completed their education. but they have not yet been handed their diplomas. We'll see what they need to do to earn that final piece of paper, or tree bark in this case, since paper hadn't been invented yet. The Pandav and Kaurav princes were assembled in the largest lecture hall at Dronacharya University. This was their graduation ceremony, their commencement. This was the day they had been looking forward to for a long while now, and their recent performance in the Royal Stadium had helped boost public opinion in their favor, except for the interruption by Karna near the end. Still, no matter, Karna's interruption did help boost the ratings, and people were hiring DVRs to relive those moments. These weren't the digital video recorders you might be familiar with. Keep in mind that the Mahabharata is from thousands of years ago. These DVRs were Dusra Din verbal reporters, people who made it their profession to observe major sporting events and to relate those to paying customers the next day. But though the DVR ratings had spiked, Arjun felt that in general, people had the attention span of a goldfish, and they'd forget Karna quickly enough. What mattered was that these princes were ready to get in on the whole running a kingdom thing, and Arjun did not feel differently. He wanted to get a move on. When was his professor going to show up to this commencement? But instead of Dronacharya, a stranger stepped in. He said that his name was Bertie, and it was a jolly morning, and all that sort of rot. And he was there to talk to them, don't you know? Duryodhan was disdainful. In typical Malfoy-like fashion, he asked Bertie why he was on stage instead of Dronacharya. What exactly did Bertie hope to teach them, besides how to dress oddly and how to walk about like a giant ape? Bertie felt that he had got Duryodhan there. Apes don't dress oddly. They don't dress at all. But he didn't want to put a student down in front of the whole class. It wouldn't be nice of him. So Bertie simply said, "I say, old chap, it's not your fault you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and a stick up your, well, you know. Why don't we just get on with the lesson here, what?" The princes weren't expecting a lesson. But this was rather unusual for Dronacharya, so they decided to wait at least a minute or two before booing Bertie out of the lecture hall. And it was a good thing that they did, because what followed was a sad story of friendship and betrayal. It began with Dronacharya when he was a little boy. That shocked the entire lecture hall. No one had imagined until that point that Dronacharya could have ever been young. Imagine how the students of Hogwarts might feel if they suddenly saw a picture of Dumbledore when he was a toddler. The princess had a shocking realization that the wider world was different than it seemed. But that was not the point of the lecture. Dronacharya, when he was a little boy, was a student at his father, Bharadwaj's ashram. Bharadwaj was a Saptarishi, one of the 7 Hall of Fame rishis. You can see them up in the night sky as the Great Bear. Because Bharadwaj was a professor, naturally, his son got a free education. Along with a world-class education, Dronacharya got something else out of studying at Bharadwaj's ashram. He got to be friends with his classmates, one classmate in particular, and that was Drupad. The two of them were thick as thieves. Often, the two would be found playing marbles, or gilli danda, or swimming in the stream, or sometimes skipping classes to go watch the matinee puppet show in the town center. A practice that is not uncommon to this day. This Jay and Viru style friendship seemed like it was going to last for eternity. Thankfully, though, they didn't sing awkward songs about it. Ye dosti hum nahi todenge. Because that is precisely what they did. That dosti or friendship of theirs came to an end. Not suddenly, but because they just drifted apart. After graduation day, they went their separate ways. They had promised to write letters to each other every week and to meet every long weekend. But that changed to writing letters once a month and later once a year and never actually meeting. Dronacharya was busy learning new skills that would make him a solid educator in the future. And Drupad claimed the administration of the kingdom was a huge burden. That was really the first time that Dronacharya seriously realized that his friend Drupad was actually a king, the king of Panchal. Dronacharya even half chuckled to himself when he remembered an incident from a long time ago. They were playing marbles, and Drupad had run out. So Drupad had wanted to borrow a few from Dronacharya. And Dronacharya grudgingly shared half of his marbles. But only after Drupad promised to share half of everything he owned with Dronacharya. Imagine that, the professor thought to himself. I could be half king of Panchal. He just chuckled and moved on. Dushasan interrupted Bertie's story at this point. Aha, so the point emerges. You want us not to make rash promises. Got it. Lesson learned. Now can you hand us our diplomas? But that wasn't the point of the story. They were about halfway through the episode's runtime. So could Dushasan just be patient here? Dronacharya married and had a child, Ashwathama. Yes, we know, someone in the crowd said. He's right here amongst us. He's also waiting for his diploma. Bertie continued, ignoring this interruption. Dronacharya was not wealthy. He wasn't below the poverty line, but he didn't really have the luxurious comforts that Drupad's children must be experiencing. Then one day, when Ashwathama was a little boy and was playing with his friends, something happened. This was at Dronacharya's ashram, where Ashwathama rubbed shoulders with royalty, just as Drona had done. What the boy experienced was peer pressure. All of his prince's friends talked about how milk was essential to being healthy, how their nutritionists and diet coaches had prescribed daily glasses of milk. This made Ashwathama curious. What was milk? He only ate his breakfast cornflakes raw. And he ate his bonvita rather than drinking it like they did. Ashwathama's rich friends thought that this was the perfect opportunity to prank him. So they took some atta or flour, mixed it with water, and told him that this was milk. The boy might never have known better. He might have accepted that milk was basically flour water. But Drone witnessed all of this. This incident triggered the professor to a pretty big extent. He was going to get his child some milk, real milk. And if there was a time to cash in on a favor, this was it. He wouldn't be asking Drupad for half his kingdom, even though he was entitled to. Drone recognized that the promise Drupad had made was a rash one, and he wouldn't be holding Drupad's feet to the fire. But yeah, he would ask for a young and healthy cow. Yeah, that should do it. He hunted down and found the last letters he had received from Drupad. The most recent one, from a few years ago, was a card that said, "Season's Greetings." Drone didn't think that he needed it to remind the king himself, but he might need it to get past Drupad's bureaucracy. What happened was quite the reverse. The bureaucracy welcomed Dronacharya in with open arms. Some of them even had selfies taken with this legend of a guru. Drupad, though, was a bit skeptical. "Oh, I'm sorry, but have we met before?" he asked. Dronacharya was shocked, but then he realized that the intervening years had been a rather large gap. So he explained who he was. "Ah, yes, my dear friend, from the Rishi, Bharatvarsha's ashram." "Bharadwaj," Drone corrected, still patiently. "Yes, that one," Drupad said, though he still sounded unsure. "So, what brings you here today, my dear friend? Grona?" "Drona," the professor corrected, getting a little miffed now. "I've come to ask for something." Drupad grumbled that times were hard. The economy was battling a recession. The bottom was falling out of the stock market. He would have gone on, so Drone quickly explained his story and explained what he needed. "Don't have a cow, man," Drupad said. "But what he offered is some tokens for Mother Dairy's milk vending machine." He also said how proud he was of his administration for having installed those all over the city. There was one right outside the palace gates. Drone should go try it. But this was not acceptable to Drone. It wasn't that his friend was refusing to give him a cow. He would gladly have accepted those Mother Dairy tokens, whatever they were, if only Drupad had just acknowledged their friendship. His friend, or ex-friend, seemed almost embarrassed by their association. Drone couldn't stand this insult, and he promptly escalated the situation. "Drupad, you promised you'd give me half your kingdom in exchange for some marbles. I'm here now to cash in on your promise." Drupad suddenly got to his feet. "Ha! I knew it. You're a con man. Or maybe you're crazy. You did talk about losing your marbles. I bet you never knew me at school. You're just here for a handout. Guards, throw him out." Bertie stopped speaking at this point. The princess, Duryodhan included, had been listening in rapt attention. "Well, what happened next?" someone prompted. "That, my dear boys, depends on you," Bertie said. The princes, who were already surprised that someone had dared insult their guru, were now shocked to learn that their guru had done nothing about it after that. Drupad was still ruler of Panchal, and their guru certainly didn't have a cow. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. A new voice spoke up from the back. It was Dronacharya. As he walked into the lecture hall, he added, I have done something about it. I've taught you all. That then was the ultimate Guru Dakshina that Drona was demanding from his students. Guru Dakshina were tuition fees that could be paid not necessarily in gold but by action, and that is what Drona was expecting. He demanded half of Drupad's kingdom, and he demanded Drupad be captured and brought before him. We are on it, thundered Duryodhan, and him and his brothers stormed out of the lecture hall. The Pandavas were about to go too, but Drona stopped them. Not you five. Stay back. I've got a much more important job for you. That job, as it turned out, was to clean up the mess in the lecture hall. All those unfinished bags of popcorn, the streamers that were discarded when the Kauravas found out that they weren't graduating today after all. Even some chewing gum. Yuck. But before you go criticizing Drona too much for an unfair division of labor, wait and hear what happened. The Kauravas were back in a couple of days, and they were badly bruised. Drona asked them what happened, and Duryodhan admitted that Drupad had beaten them. He had launched a sneak attack. He ambushed them before they could ambush him. It wasn't fair. What was the world coming to if a person couldn't even ambush the enemy without having to watch their back at every turn? But no matter. Duryodhan said that he was going to take a larger army and try again. No, commanded Drona. Arjun, you can go try your luck. And take your brothers along for company. Arjun and the other 4 Pandavas started right away. It was just the 5 of them. And this time, there were no surprises. Actually, the only surprise was the one that Drupad felt when he saw only 5 Pandavas on the battlefield. Where was the retaliatory army that Drupad had expected? Were these 5 just the messengers? But no, they were carrying weapons, so they must be warriors. If it was just those 5, Drupad thought that he'd be back home in time for tea. But the king quickly found out how wrong he was. On the Pandav side, the brothers stood tense, looking at an army of thousands in front of them. Yudhishthir turned to Bhim and said, It's not looking that good. There are a lot of soldiers. I'll take the 2 on the left. Can you take the 9,998 on the right? Bhim was going to protest about why he was being denied a wholesome 5-figure number. That's what Yudhishthir did last time. It made Bhim's record look just short, no matter how many soldiers he battled at a time. Relax, bros, Arjun said. This one's on me. He lazily pulled an arrow and fired it into the sky. On the other side of the battlefield, Drupad saw this and laughed. Look at him, he missed, Drupad said. How can anyone miss when the target is as wide as an army of 10,000 people? Arjun was supposed to fire straight ahead, and he couldn't even do that. But the joke was on Drupad. Arjun had not launched an ordinary arrow. It was a very special one that Arjun had in his quiver. It invoked lightning, and in a flash, 10,000 bolts shot out of the sky, and 10,000 soldiers collapsed on the ground. It helps to have a father who is the god of thunder and lightning. Thanks, Dad, Arjun said, looking up at the sky towards Indra. No problem, son, Indra shouted down from Swarg or heaven. Do come visit sometime. Arjun said that he would, but he had a battle to deal with. Well, he really didn't. The battle was over already. Bhim, with his bare hands, was twisting Drupad's chariot, crumpling it and compacting it into such a small cube that an entrepreneur passing by later built an entire industry around recycling chariot metal. Despite using heavy industrial machinery, that entrepreneur never managed the compaction ratio that Bhim had with his bare hands. Drupad wasn't in the chariot when it was compacted. Seeing his army decimated and his chariot crushed to the size of a matchbox had left him with no choice. He meekly agreed to go quietly. Drona was pleased with the Pandavs' result. Naturally, Duryodhan and his brothers complained about how it was all just luck. Still, they didn't think it mattered. What was the point of impressing your professor when you're practically done with school? They did not realize that though they were done with school, they weren't done with Drona. He would play a role later on in the storyline, but that's for later. Drona and Drupad signed an agreement. Ashwatthama became king of half of what was Panchal. Drupad was quiet and didn't say anything, even when Drona said that they could go back to being friends. Drona guessed that the king needed time to process these events. Well, he didn't want to intrude. Drupad could carry on and go home now. He had half a kingdom to run, didn't he? Ashwatthama would go with him. The two half-kings built some camaraderie on the way, and Ashwatthama could get some deep background from Drupad about the half of the kingdom that he was taking over. Drupad never forgot what happened. He was not done. He'd be having his revenge on Drona. But it was also clear that he didn't have the right weapons and the right commanders yet. He wasn't upset with the Pandavas, even though they had been the ones to defeat him. He realized that they were just following their guru's direction. He needed someone like Arjun on his side. He had never seen the kind of power that kid had wielded. Drupad decided to do something about it. And he did, in fact, do something about it. He performed a yajna, which was a special prayer, to be blessed with a child who could destroy Drona. Drupad was blessed not just with one child, but two, a boy and a girl. The boy would destroy Drona. Drupad would make sure of it. And his typically patriarchal mindset decided that the girl could marry Arjun. That girl, Draupadi, would go on to become a central character in this epic. That's it for this time. Previous Mahabharata episodes are linked on the site and in the show notes. Check them out. In the next episode, we are going to cover the story of Sakshi Gopal. The story features a young man and a woman in love. The man does everything right and tries really hard to get permission from the woman's family. But he gives in to one tiny temptation. It may remind you of Orpheus' story from Greek mythology. Thank you all for the comments on social media and on Spotify's Q&A. I can't directly reply to the questions there, but I'll address them here on this show. Thank you Arush and Rez and Dave for the feedback. Raghu and Vamshi, your requests are noted. I've added them to my queue. And Bindu and Hot Wheels Vedant Man, I agree with your assessment of the tragic ending of the previous episode. Poor Andi. If you have any other comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you'd like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast or reply to the questions on Spotify's Q&A. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.